The year was 1997. A winter that swallowed sound beneath miles of frozen silence. Veteran diver Elias Vanner entered the sub-zero depths of Lake Vostrom to document the shifting ice layers for a climatology study. Beneath the opaque blue, his breathing was the only rhythm. A fragile echo inside an endless cathedral of frost. His tether line pulsed once, twice, then went still. On the surface, the research team waited, snow biting their faces, but Elias never emerged. His body was never found, only the gaping hole in the ice and the memory of his last transmission. Something's moving under me. 25 years later, a salvage team would recover a corroded handheld camcorder wedged deep in a fissure of black ice. Against all logic, its red light was still on, recording. 25 winters later, the lake had changed. Wider, deeper, crueler. The air smelled of iron and memory. The expedition's new leader, Dr. Halden Rios, stared through the biting wind toward the same coordinates recorded in 1997. Beneath meters of ice, sensors began to flicker with strange interference. He had seen the recovered footage, an unbroken 42 minutes of static, then a faint image of Elias's face, frozen mid-breath, his eyes moving as though aware of the camera. The diverse chatter turned uneasy. They whispered of voices in the feed, sounds not matching any known frequency. Rios pressed his recorder to his lips, speaking softly into the storm. "We're not alone beneath this ice." "We never were." The recovered camera was dissected in a sterile lab 3,000 miles away. Technicians in white gloves extracted its tape reel, remarkably intact. Forensic restorers ran it through digital calibration, their screens flickering with frames of Elias descending, the timestamp frozen on February 3rd, 1997. The footage revealed no screams, no thrashing, only silence and a faint rhythmic sound beneath the audio floor, like slow breathing. Experts argued it was distortion. One engineer disagreed, noting the spectral pattern didn't match any known mechanical frequency. "It's not noise," she whispered. "It's something listening back." At 2:14 a.m., Rios woke in his tent, the wind clawing against the nylon walls. He reached for his radio. Static. Again. Then, through the snow's hiss, came a voice, faint, low, familiar. "Halden, follow the line." His breath froze midair. That was Elias's voice, unmistakable, drawn from a recording that should have been impossible to transmit. Rios stumbled outside, the moon casting brittle silver light over the frozen expanse. A thin trail of red light shimmered beneath the ice, stretching toward the lake's center. He followed. When they found Rios the next morning, he was lying face down on the ice, alive but incoherent. His camera recorded 6 hours of footage showing nothing but still water. Yet, when the final frame was enhanced, Elias's face appeared, pressed against the underside of the ice, eyes open, hand raised, as if in warning. The recovered audio ended with a single breath, long, hollow, and human. "The lake was sealed off within a week," declared a restricted research zone. But locals still say when the temperature drops below 30, the ice hums with voices, calling for anyone who dares to listen. The footage spread quietly through encrypted channels. Government, military, and a few private collectors. Dr. Karen Lutz, long retired and living in isolation near Tromsø, received a copy on an unmarked drive. When she pressed play, the first minute was static. Then, Elias's voice, whispering her name through 40 feet of ice and 25 years of silence. "Karen." Still recording. She froze. The timestamp had shifted, reading 2022-11-14, the day Rios disappeared. Her hand trembled as frost crept along her window, though her room was warm. The lake had begun calling again, and this time it remembered every name. That night she couldn't sleep. The storm outside howled like the lake itself. and in its rhythm she heard the same cadence from Elias's last dive transmission. She took the drive, wrapped it in cloth, and stepped into the cold, drawn by something deeper than reason. Her flashlight beam cut through the snow, illuminating the forest path leading down to the fjord. The ice there wasn't natural, too smooth, too blue, as though it had been melted and reformed from within. As she approached, the beam of light bent, refracted through the ice in a way that made her reflection move when she did not. She set up a small recording device at the fjord's edge. "Elias," she whispered, "if you can hear me, answer." For several minutes there was only wind. Then, the water beneath the ice began to pulse. Soft, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. The sound grew louder, until she realized it was syncing with her own pulse. A low vibration climbed up through her boots. The recorder light blinked red, then white. A figure began to form beneath the ice, not whole, but fragmented, as though time itself had cracked and refrozen around it. Back inside the cabin, her recordings distorted, frequencies folding over each other like layered whispers. When slowed down, one voice stood out, "Return it." She stared at the flash drive, now frostbitten, tiny tendrils of ice spreading across its metal edge. She placed it in a steel thermos and locked it in a chest beneath the floorboards. Yet even through the wood, the faint hum persisted, a resonance, as if the lake had found a new vessel through her. 3 days later, her cabin was found empty. The door hung open, snow piled against the threshold. On the table lay her old field notes and a final page, scrawled in shaky handwriting. Haze under the ice, but not alone. Investigators followed footprints leading down to the fjord, stopping abruptly where the ice began. Her flashlight was found standing upright, still on, its beam piercing into a perfect circular hole, freshly cut. The ice around it had begun to freeze again, sealing over the darkness below. By the time the recovery team arrived from Oslo, the fjord had frozen over once more, smooth as glass, flawless, as though nothing had ever disturbed its surface. The rescue divers drilled through 2 meters of ice, but found only a hollow space beneath, like a dome of air suspended in black water. Within that void floated Dr. Lutzparka, perfectly preserved, her flashlight still flickering, when the lead diver, Henrik Solstad, reviewed the camera feed from his dive. A reflection appeared behind him in one frame, not his own, but a man's face, aged 38, wearing an obsolete diving mask from the 1990s. The timestamp at the corner of the footage read 1997. At the surface, the ice began to vibrate, not from wind or shifting pressure, but rhythmically, as if something below was knocking in sequence. The team stopped their drills. 3 knocks, Henrik whispered through the comms, voice trembling. "Same as the distress signal Elias used?" The sound echoed outward through the fjord, and for a moment, the landscape seemed to breathe. The sonar picked up movement, but it wasn't fish nor current. It was a shape, slowly circling beneath the divers. One that matched human proportions but moved impossibly smooth, as if it were swimming through memory instead of water. That night, Henrik couldn't sleep. In the portable field tent, he replayed the dive footage frame by frame, searching for the anomaly. Each time the reflection appeared, the tent's lights flickered. On the 4th replay, the reflection moved before he did, its eyes turning toward the camera. The feed warped, showing fragments of Elias' last dive. Broken light, the tether unraveling, his hand pressing against the lens. Henrik froze as he realized the sequence didn't match the archived footage. It was new. The same motion, but seen from a different angle, as if someone else had been there with Elias under the ice. In the early hours, wind swept across the fjord with a sound like whispering breath. The team's instruments recorded faint, electromagnetic surges aligning perfectly with the ice's vibration frequency. Henrik stepped outside, guided by the pulse emanating through the frozen ground. He kneeled and placed his palm flat against the surface, The ice was warm. Through its translucent blue, faint streaks of red light moved in branching patterns, pulsing like veins. For a heartbeat, he saw Elias again. Not as a reflection this time, but standing beneath him, motionless, hand raised in invitation. By dawn, the team's camp was silent. Equipment powered down without warning, generators freezing mid-cycle. Only Henrik remained, standing over the hole they had drilled, staring into the still black water. "He's calling," he murmured to no one. "It's not over." The ice beneath his boots began to thin, spreading fractures like delicate glass. When the others returned at sunrise, all they found were his boots and helmet at the hole's edge, the same place Dr. Lutz had vanished. The sonar, still running, displayed two figures moving side by side below the ice. One new, one old, forever circling each other in silence. A month later, the fjord was declared sealed. No research, no trespassing, no explanation. Yet the data leaked. Frequencies from the last dive logs revealed a repeating sequence. 3 tones, one long, one short, one long. Identical to a marine distress signal recorded in 1997. The anomaly reached the Norwegian Institute of Polar Acoustics, where Dr. Nils Hart listened in disbelief. When amplified and slowed, the tones shaped into a rhythm resembling a human breath. Then, faintly, a voice whispered beneath the signal. He followed. The word carried the same tremor pattern as a live recording, impossible for something frozen beneath 2 decades of ice. Earhart transferred the data into an acoustic simulation chamber, converting the frequencies into sound waves within a sealed environment. As the tones played through the speakers, condensation formed on the steel walls, then froze instantly. The sound was low, almost inaudible. A deep human resonance that made the air vibrate in his chest. The instruments began to fail one by one, their displays dimming. In the final second before power cut, the room's sensors captured a heat signature, humanoid, standing directly behind him. After that night, Earhart vanished from official records, but security footage remained, grainy, flickering, incomplete. It showed him leaving the facility barefoot, walking calmly into a snowstorm at 2:47 a.m. The door swung open behind him, yet no snow blew inside. The last camera to capture him faced the Institute's eastern cliffs. In the frame, Earhart stands at the precipice, staring down at the frozen sea. For a single frame, another figure stands beside him. Blurred, almost transparent, its outline identical to Elias Vanner's. Then both vanish in the whiteout. Weeks later, journalists discovered Earhart's private notebook, mailed anonymously to a research editor in Bergen. Inside were transcriptions of his final recordings, spectral analyses that suggested the ice was not merely reflective, but responsive. The data implied that every human voice ever lost beneath it had been captured in microscopic vibrations, preserved as sound fossils. One margin note read, "It remembers everything we say. It just waits for silence to answer." No one could trace the sender. The envelope was postmarked from Lake Vostrom. At dawn the next morning, the editor received an email from an untraceable address. Attached was an audio file titled, "Response Mute." It contained only 6 seconds. Faint breathing, a soft crackling sound like ice breaking, and then a whisper, not in words, but a single exhale that matched Elias' recorded respiration pattern from 1997. Experts confirmed it couldn't have been synthesized. The tone carried the micro-fluctuations of a live human lung. But there was one anomaly. The final half-second contained 2 overlapping breaths, perfectly synchronized. Elias's and someone else. The sound spread like a contagion, copied, shared, remixed by curious researchers and thrill seekers. Within days, devices began malfunctioning. Phones froze. Radios hummed with low tones even when switched off, and recordings of the file played backwards revealed a faint syllable. Those who listened long enough reported strange dreams, frozen corridors, flickering lights, a pressure in their chest as if underwater. One by one, listeners began vanishing near lakes and rivers across Scandinavia. Investigators traced them all back to a single download, timestamped 3/14. The same time Earhart disappeared. The sound had become a beacon, and the ice was calling its own. Dr. Halden Rio's footage resurfaced, but this time it was different. The first half was identical to the known recording, but 39 minutes in, new frames appeared. The camera rose from beneath the ice, revealing the lake from below, a reversed world where sky shimmered beneath him. Then came the reflection. Elias, looking older, his mask cracked, reaching up as though pushing Rios toward the surface. But the timestamp at the corner didn't read 1997 or 2022. It read 20,033-23, a date that hadn't yet arrived. For those who saw it, the implication was chilling. The recording wasn't from the past. It was from what was coming. By now, the Norwegian government sealed off the lake permanently, draping the region in secrecy. But the story had already escaped. Anonymous videos surfaced. Hikers filming faint red glows beneath frozen ponds. Fishermen hearing names whispered through sonar. A journalist traced the phenomenon to shifting magnetic fields beneath Vostrom, though her camera caught something her eyes did not. When she panned over the ice, the reflection of a diver stared back, mouth open, breathing, despite no one being there. She deleted the footage that night. The next morning, her tent was found zipped shut from the inside, her recorder still running. It captured the sound of water, and someone knocking 3 times. A month later, satellite imagery revealed a widening fissure across Lake Vostrom, stretching kilometers in a near-perfect circle. Beneath it, thermal readings suggested a sudden heat bloom, like something alive beneath the ice. Analysts dismissed it as geothermal activity, but locals spoke of nights when the ice breathed, rising and falling like lungs. Those who lived closest swore they heard voices under the surface. Not words, but the echo of every person lost there, speaking in unison. One fisherman claimed he saw faces, hundreds, staring upward in silence as though waiting for the next diver to join them. In the final recovered transmission, a deep hum rises beneath layers of static, growing louder with each loop. At its peak, a single voice pierces through, Elias, unmistakable, whispering, "We opened it." The hum shifts into a low, continuous vibration, the kind that rattles bones, but feels almost like breathing. Then silence. The world above Lake Vostrom remains still, sealed beneath miles of glassy cold. Yet, in the dead of winter, when temperatures fall below 35, the ice begins to shimmer faintly red. Locals say it's just light refraction, but those who've stood close enough to hear it swear the ice still breathes. And sometimes it calls their name. It began again in January, 6 months after the Vostrom lockdown. The ice sensors reactivated on their own, transmitting data to a satellite no longer in orbit. In Oslo, a graduate student named Lena Halvorsen discovered the transmission hidden in archived channels, repeating coordinates, pulsing at intervals of exactly 42 seconds. Each pulse matched a depth reading from beneath the lake, 97 meters. She replayed the sound, slowed it down, filtered it, and heard breathing. Not mechanical, not rhythmic. Human. When she adjusted the spectrum, the breath became speech. Surface breach. Imminent. That night, power outages rippled across the northern grid, and beneath the silence, the same voice whispered her name. Lena traced the signal to a classified observatory near the Arctic Circle. It was supposed to be abandoned, but when she arrived, the gates were open, lights flickering deep within. Inside, the air carried the familiar metallic tang of cold machinery and salt. Monitors lined the walls, each showing static except for one. It displayed a live feed of the lake, perfectly calm, except for a single circular ripple expanding outward. Then the feed glitched, replacing the image with coordinates, followed by a message typed in slow sequence. Open channel below. She obeyed the message. One keystroke opened the channel. The building's hum deepened as dormant systems reawakened. Subsonic emitters, thermal regulators, sonar pings echoing through the earth. Through the floor vents, faint mist began to rise, freezing midair into translucent ribbons. The screens flickered. On the central display, a face emerged, blurred by distortion, but recognizable. Elias, older now, eyes clouded, mouth moving without sound. The words translated automatically in text across the bottom of the feed. "We were never lost. We are beneath you." Then the feed fractured into hundreds of overlapping reflections, each resembling Lena herself, diving, drowning, resurfacing, multiplied through layers of glass. At 3:02 a.m., seismic activity registered across the region. A pulse, perfectly circular, radiating outward from the lake. Beneath the observatory, Lena felt the ground tremble, followed by a sound like distant breathing, amplified through the bedrock. Alarms blared, but the screens displayed no error. Instead, they showed the water level rising. The ice wasn't cracking. It was melting from underneath. She ran outside as a low red glow rippled across the horizon. The frozen plains shimmered like liquid glass, and from beneath the ice, faint human silhouettes pressed upward. Dozens of them, faces blurred but eyes open. By morning, the observatory was gone. Satellite imagery showed only a crater filled with refrozen water, perfectly circular, smooth, untouched. Authorities released a statement citing thermal destabilization, but the data logs from that night continued to transmit. In the final recording, Lena's voice is calm, almost serene. "If anyone finds this," she says, "don't listen to the ice. It doesn't echo. It remembers." Then the static shifts and Elias's voice joins hers, speaking the same words in perfect sync. The last sound before the feed ends is unmistakable. One long exhale shared by two voices, slowly becoming one. Months passed. The world above Lake Vostrom moved on, though the stories didn't. Rumors spread through remote Arctic stations, whispers of divers resurfacing in distant lakes with no memory of how they arrived. In one case, a man found unconscious beneath 2 inches of frost claimed he'd been underwater for a single breath, though medical reports showed tissue exposure consistent with decades. Governments classified the region indefinitely, but data still leaked, sonar echoes returning impossible depths as if the ice had become hollow. Beneath that silence, the hum persisted, a single, endless note resonating across the poles, tracing the heartbeat of something vast awakening below. Somewhere deep beneath that ice, the recording continued. A research buoy near the old observatory detected weak analog video signals transmitting from below. Impossible, given all cameras were destroyed. When decoded, the footage revealed a single diver drifting through black water. His suit bore no markings, his helmet cracked, but illuminated from within. He moved slowly, hands outstretched, as if guiding unseen currents. Around him, fragments of machinery, bones, and glass floated upward. In one brief frame, another diver appeared beside him, smaller, feminine, her visor glowing faint white. They reached for each other, fingertips nearly touching before the image fractured into static. Across the northern hemisphere, low-frequency tremors began sensing with the pulse once localized to Vostrom. Ice caps cracked in harmonic intervals. Radios near coastlines picked up untraceable transmissions, wordless breathing, always followed by faint knocking. 3 short taps. Scientists proposed that the ice itself had become a resonant body, storing centuries of vibration. But others whispered that the ice had become something more, not a barrier, but a membrane. Every sound it ever absorbed was preparing to emerge again, reversed. Every name it had taken was learning to speak. At an emergency summit in Geneva, officials gathered to discuss subglacial acoustic phenomena. But when the first data sample was played through the chamber speakers, the lights dimmed. The sound carried through every microphone and window pane, forming frost patterns shaped like handprints. Delegates sat frozen, unable to move, as the recording transformed into a collective murmur. Hundreds of voices blending into one. The session was terminated within minutes, yet every device present continued to replay the sound for hours afterward, even when disconnected from power. One transcript described the phenomenon simply: "The ice is speaking back." At last, the final transmission came through the same untraceable channel that once carried Elias's voice. No timestamp, no coordinates, only an image file attached. When opened, it revealed an aerial view of Earth, but altered. The poles darkened, the oceans faintly luminescent, veins of red light stretching between them like a circulatory system. Audio accompanied it, breathing, synchronized across both hemispheres. Then, Elias's voice, distant yet clear. "The surface was never ours." A long exhale followed, deep enough to rattle microphones across continents. For 6 full seconds the planet hummed in unison, then silence. The recording ended. The hum never did.